Morning, everyone. So, this morning we are doing a story based on the life of Nelson Mandela. That's who we're going to be looking at for a couple of days this week. Normally, we would do some interesting facts and information about him, but I thought I would start with a story that I found about him, which does have interesting facts about him in the story. So, now he was born in a place called South Africa, so some of the names of the places are quite difficult to pronounce, and I may actually get them wrong. So I'm very sorry for that, but here we go. Early on the morning of the 18th of July 1918 in the South African village of Bevetso in Transkei, Nozenki gives birth to a boy. The boy is me. My father's name is Gadla, and he is chief among the Thembu people. A boy, a boy! We'll call him Roli Lahala. In Hosa, my name means break the branch off the tree, but it also means troublemaker, which is what I was born to be. I have many fond memories from my childhood. We moved to a village called Kunu, where I hunted and knew freedom. I gathered nuts and honey, became a master of fencing with sticks, and roasted maize under the stars, and learned how to talk to women. Choose the best one you like. Among the Thembu, if a girl chose a boy, he could keep her company. The girls were a lot smarter than us boys. Often they teased us on the way home. I tended to cattle and learnt to ride the calves. But a donkey taught me a lesson. We took turns mounting the donkey, and when it was my turn, the donkey bolted into a thorn bush. He lowered his head so I'd fall off, which I did when the thorns had ripped at my face. Everyone laughed at me, and I learned how cruel and foolish it is to humiliate a loser. My dad told us about war heroes, but my mother's stories taught me about being human. This story taught us the value of being helpful. My dad's stories always used to start about once a wanderer met an old woman. Her eyes were cloudy, and she asked him for help, but he turned and walked away. Another man passed by, and the old woman asked him to bathe her eyes. He didn't like doing it, but he helped her. Like a miracle, the scales fell from her eyes, and she turned into a lovely young woman. He married her and lived a good life. None of my siblings went to school, but one day, when I was 7, Dad took me to one side. "My son," he said, "you are going to start school, and so you must have proper clothing." He cut his trousers, his very best trousers, in half. "Put these on," he said. The trousers now were the right length, but the waist was absolutely massive. So he got a piece of cord and string, put it through the belt buckles, and pulled them together so it looked like I was wearing a paper bag. Since then, I have never been as proud of any suit that I've ever worn as I was of Dad's cut-off trousers that day. "Roli Lahala!" shouted the teacher one day. "Yes, Miss Digame?" "You must have an English name, which I'll use here in school. I think I am going to call you Nelson." And that is how I became Nelson, because the whites wanted us to have English-sounding names. When I was 16, it was time for me to become a man. We boys were taken to 2 huts by the river, where we were to spend our last days as boys. Before the ceremony, though, we had to do something daring. So we decided to catch a pig. Never had the meat from that pig tasted better than it did that night. "Oh, I am a man now," I said to me and my friends. My reward was 2 female cows called heifers and 4 sheep. Oh, I thought I was the richest man. I was a man now on this earth. Here are our sons, young, strong, and handsome, the flower of the Hosa tribe. Our pride and joy, we promised them a life as men, but the promise cannot be kept. Like all black South Africans, we are a conquered people, slaves in our own country, said our tribesmen. These men will cough out their lungs in the white man's gold mines, destroying their health so the whites can live like kings. I was disturbed by our chief's words. I didn't want to hear his words, which spoiled my great day, the day I became a man, because I'd never been on the other side of the river. This was all I knew. I didn't know what he was talking about. But I had a nasty feeling in my stomach, creeping in, that he might actually be right over on the other side of the river. So I set off. And when I got to Johannesburg, I started to understand what the chief meant. There was one world for whites and one for us blacks. There were many laws to keep us out of the white man's world. This was called apartheid, separation of the races. We had to show a pass to say that we could get through. Blacks had to have passes to move about in our own country. I worked in the day and I studied at night. A person called Oliver Tambo helped me, and together he and I opened a law firm to help blacks who were victims of the apartheid laws. And we were known as Mandela and Tambo attorneys. Apartheid makes a black man a criminal if he enters a door or gets on a bus or walks on a beach that is meant only for whites. But we say not guilty because the law is wrong, not us. I joined the ANC, which was the African National Congress, which had been fighting for our rights since 1912. I used to say we must get everyone to refuse to obey these vicious laws. And along with many, many other black people, I burned my pass in protest. This meant that I was banned, and a banned person could only meet with one other person at any time. And then my ban got extended, and I was banned for an extra 5 years. At the People's Congress in 1955, all races were represented. Being banned, I could not attend, but I helped write the Freedom Charter that was adopted that day. We, the people of South Africa, declare that the whole world shall know that South Africa belongs to everyone who lives here, black and white. They were my words. I helped write that, but I could not attend. And then, because of that, I was arrested for high treason. 156 people were arrested along with me. Almost all of the ANC leaders were with them that were arrested. The trial took over 4 years. And sometimes I'm in prison during that trial. Sometimes I'm not. But I'm always banned from meeting lots of people. I can only be with one other person in public. And one day, I saw a proud, beautiful woman who I just couldn't forget. I couldn't get her out of my mind. And I was destined to meet her again. She came to my law office, and I was introduced to her. Her name was Winnie. I thought, I'm going to ask her out on a date. We got married while I was still under prosecution. And I was already marrying a woman who was married to politics. In March 1961, we were all acquitted of high treason, but I knew the government wouldn't let us off lightly. The accused, the judge said, were found not guilty. And that same day, I made the decision to go underground. I asked Winnie to take care of our children, Zenny and Zinzi, and I left my 2 children alone with their mum, Winnie, and I became a creature of the night. While others slept, I drove to secret meetings all over the country. We held talks where we'd been struggling for non-violently for 50 years, but the government violence against us grew stronger, and we must pay it back, we said, like for like. I wrote to the newspapers saying, I live as an outlaw in my own land, kept apart from my family. I shall fight the government side by side with you, my people. What are you going to do? For my own part, I have made my choice. The struggle for freedom is my life, and I will continue fighting until the end of my days. Often, I lived with whites. Every morning at dawn, I got up and jogged for an hour. I spent the days in hiding, longing for my wife Winnie and my children. Meanwhile, at home, Winnie kept the children safe, saying to them that they would see their dad one day. Whenever they visited me, they had to change the car several times to shake off the police that were following them. Newspaper reports would say the Black Pimpernel has been found and seen in Johannesburg. And the papers called me the Black Pimpernel because I popped up here and I turned up there, never getting caught, just like the Scarlet Pimpernel from France, from the time of the French Revolution, who was a literary hero who always got away. I always had 3 penny coins in my pocket so I could call the papers and ridicule the police. Once I saw a black security policeman walking towards me. But, thinking it was all over, he gave me the ANC salute. When I wasn't a chauffeur, I was a cook or a gardener. And according to my pass, I was David Motsamai. I travelled to many African countries to get support for our struggle. Even before I came home again, the headlines were screaming, "The Black Pimpernel returns!" But I hadn't. I'll never forget the 5th of August 1962. Cecil Williams and I were en route from Durban to Johannesburg when he said, "We're being followed." A car passed us and signalled us to stop. 17 months of freedom are about to come to an end. "I'm Sergeant Voster. Who are you?" this man said. "I'm David Motsamai." "You are not. You are Nelson Mandela, and that is Cecil Williams, and you are both under arrest." I hid my notebook in the car, and they never found it. For if they had, many, many people would have been arrested. I was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but a year later it was time for my new trial. The judge said to me, "Mandela, do you plead guilty or not to sabotage?" We were accused of sabotage and knew we could be hanged for it. I said to the judge, "It's not me, but you who should be on trial. As a government, I plead not guilty." In spite of everything, we couldn't help winding the guards up. "Stop there," they would say. "Give me that note." "Oh, of course, Mr. Swanepoel," I would say, and the note would say, "Oh, he's a cute boy, that Mr. Swanepoel." Every night I worked on my defence speech. Remember, I am a lawyer. But when the lawyers saw it, "If Mandela's give that speech, they'll hang him on the spot." I spoke for 4 hours. I have cherished the idea of a free society in which all persons live together in harmony. If need be, I am prepared to die for it. The judge sentenced me to life in prison. A life in prison. At least I wasn't going to hang. So I was sent to a place called Robben Island, the prison from which no one had ever escaped alive. As we arrived, the guards had said this is a place where I would die, because I would never leave. We got to wear short pants, a thin sweater and jacket, even though it was winter. By day we worked the limestone quarry, and we could discuss and learn while we worked. Twice a year we got to receive and send letters, but they couldn't exceed 500 words. The letters we sent and those we got were all checked and words were crossed out. One morning I was told I would be getting a visit the next day. Winnie and I talked via a microphone. I could barely see her through the cloudy glass. It was dreadful not being able to touch her. If we talked about anything but the family, the visit would be ended. In time, we developed a secret code. What about the church? Are the vicars delivering their sermons? The church was code for the ANC, the vicars and its leaders. It would be 22 years before I could hug Winnie again. When Zinzi was 12, she sent a poem to me that ended like this. My heart is aching, I long for my father, long to see my father, or at least to hold his hand and comfort him, or at least to tell him that he will return one day. Winnie was often banned or imprisoned. In 1977, she and Zinzi were forcibly removed to Brandfort. Being banned, Winnie could only meet one person at a time. When two of Winnie's friends came to visit, she was arrested because she met them both at the same time, even though they came to visit her. In prison, we could read certain books. Other books and newspapers were banned. But we managed to get information in other ways. The guards' sandwiches were wrapped in newspaper, and sometimes we got hold of the pages. We tore out the important articles, copied them, and distributed the copies. We were forbidden to communicate with prisoners in other cell blocks, but we found ways to spread news to each other, putting them in matchboxes, false-bottomed matchboxes. Mandela, said one prison guard once, I can help you escape. I'll give a sleeping tablet to the guard in the watchtower. You can have a key and I'll take you to the boat. The boat had diver's gear, so you could swim into Cape Town. There you can take an airstrip and flown out of the country. I wouldn't trust him, said one of the inmates. Later, we found out that the guard was an agent of the Secret Intelligence Services, and I was supposed to be killed while escaping. In 1982, I was moved, along with Walter, Raymond and Andrew, to another prison. Compared to Robben Island, it was pure luxury. We got real beds with sheets, and I did exercises every morning at 5 a.m. But outside the walls, the government's violence increased. We knew we had support everywhere. Countries like Norway and Sweden never let us down. Several times I'd been offered my freedom, but only if I denounced the violence. Excuse me. It's the government that must put an end to the violence, I would say, and abolish apartheid. South Africa belongs to all citizens, black and white. Not just the whites. In 1985, Zinzi read my first message to the people in 21 years. I cherish my freedom dearly, but I care even more for your freedom. President Botha must unban the ANC, free all who have been imprisoned, dismantle apartheid, and guarantee free political activity. I will not give any undertaking at any time when I and you people are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. I will return. The government was under increasing pressure at this time, and I met the new president, de Klerk, for talks. The talks were very, very fruitful. Tomorrow morning, Mr. de Klerk declared, I shall have you released. On the 11th of February 1990, after almost 28 years, or 10,000 days in prison, I was free. In 1993, de Klerk and I shared the Nobel Peace Prize. On the 27th of April 1994, 82 years after the ANC began the struggle, I and all the black people voted for the first time. Over 62% of all the South Africans voted for the ANC, and I became president. In my village, I went home to meet my people. When I was their age, I had known nothing about politics. I couldn't be there when my mother was buried. I thought of all those who had fought for our freedom, but never lived to see it, and all of those torn from their loved ones. Never and never again shall this beautiful land experience the oppression by one over another. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. By 1993, Winnie and I had parted. Her life was more difficult than mine while I was in prison. and I parted from her with love. The truth about the abuses under apartheid had to be told, but other countries' peoples had to be reconciled. Archbishop Desmond Tutu led the Truth Commission, which could give amnesty if those who had committed acts of cruelty told the truth. I had so longed to see my grandchildren, so I gave myself 3 tasks to do when I was free. To see to it that South Africa's people got their freedom, to visit my mother's grave, and to play with my grandchildren. On Robben Island, children were forbidden to visit. I saw how apartheid had made life hard for so many children, so I set up Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund. In 1986, when Mozambique's president, Samora Machel, died in a plane crash, I sent a letter of condolence to Gracia Machel from Robben Island. Fate and Gracia's work for children brought us together. I was taken by her grace and her love of children. I called her a lot on the telephone. And when I was 80, we got married. Gracia helps poor girls in Mozambique to go to school, and she fights abuse against children. In 2010, 7.1 million voting children chose me and Gracia as their decade child rights heroes. We were extremely proud. And that is the end of that story. That's a very long story. I will see you tomorrow with some more interesting facts, because that only goes up to 2010, about Nelson Mandela's life. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.